last week we started chapter 18, and it began with Arjun raising the question of whether the type of ritual acts that Krishna had referred to in relation to Om Tat Sat at the end of chapter 17 should be performed, or whether they should be renounced, given up. And Krishna, after accepting that both views are valid and both views are put forward by wise people, he determined that actions of yajna, dana and tapa, ritual offerings, charity, acts of tapas, austerity, should be performed because they are purifying, even for Manishins, even for wise people. So Krishna is in favor of actions, and that really ties in with the overall perspective of the Gita, which is very much about renunciation whilst remaining in one's position in the world, not going away to a monastery or wandering around in the remote regions as Buddhists, Jains and some Hindu sadhus might do, but staying in your position, performing your duties with regard to the world, and developing renunciation as a state of consciousness rather than a physical position, changing one's status and position in the world. Okay, then another point Krishna made about renunciation was it's trividam. As with everything else in this world, it is shaped and influenced by the three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. And last week we were talking about, Krishna was talking about renunciation under tamas, renunciation under rajas. Where it's tamas, renunciation is done therefore out of sheer laziness, negligence. I can't be bothered to act. I just neglect, stupidity. That's tamas. And then Krishna also said that where rajas is the influencing factor, where the guna of rajas, then renunciation may be performed simply because duties are dukkha, they're troublesome, they're hard to perform, and therefore you want to refrain from doing them. You only want to do the nice actions, only duty when it's pleasing, not duty when it's hard. So that's rajas. And Krishna said at the end of that verse, which was verse 8, Naiva Tyagam Tyaga Palam Labate. If you give up, if you're a renunciate simply because life has become troublesome and you want to get out of your obligations, you don't get any of the results of renunciation. Now then, Krishna, and as I said, he's reversed his usual order for discussing the gunas, so he's leaving sattva till last in this case. This is the only time he does that in his series of threefold analyses. He says, in verse 9, isn't it that where we're starting from? Yes. Karyamitye vayat karma niyatam kriyater juna. So niyatam karma niyatam, he says, is obligatory action. Fulfilling our responsibilities to our community, to our society, to our family, etc. All of those obligations that come on, we've got our obligations to our parents, our obligations to our children, our obligations to society, to the wider community. This is niyatam karma. It's karma that we're obliged to perform, and ideally it should be performed kriyate karyamiti, with the thought in mind. Again, it's that word iti, which really so often takes the place of inverted commas. This is the thought that's in the mind, that this niyatam karma, why should I do it? Sometimes it's troublesome to do our obligatory actions, to fulfill our responsibilities. Why karyamiti? Just because it's the right thing to do. It's the same grammatical structure that you may recall when Krishna was talking about charity. There he said, Datavyam is the reason why charity should be given, because it's the right thing to do. It should be given. Karyam is the only motivating factor when one decides to perform one's obligatory duties, not seeking any result, any reward, status, reputation, future karma, simply karyam iti. It should be done. It is my duty, my responsibility, and I'm not going to shirk that responsibility. Therefore, he says, Karimitieva yak karma, niyatam kriyater juna, but here's the crucial point, sangam tyaktva palam chaiva. Tyaktva means, it's the same word as charja. Tyakta means giving up. What are you giving up? Sangha, attachments. And also palam chaiva, and palam as well, the desire for results. It is essentially desireless action. And of course, those who have long memories will recall, or very familiar with the Gita will remember back in chapter 2 and 3 how Krishna put great emphasis on this idea of performing action devoid of selfish desire, and that he described as karma yoga, a spiritual practice based around fulfilling one's worldly duties. So he says there, sangam tyaktva palam chaiva satyaga satviko mataha. I think that's right, isn't it? Satyaga, that form of tyaga, that form of renunciation is sattvic. Is that right? Satyaga satviko mataha is considered to be sattvic. Mataha means it is regarded as, it is thought of as sattvic. Now, interesting point here, because essentially what Krishna's described in this 9th verse of the 18th chapter is what he's already referred to, as I mentioned in chapters 2 and 3, as karma yoga, performing action without any selfish motivation, simply because it's the right thing to do, karyamiti. There, Krishna in chapters 2 and 3 said this was a purely spiritual practice, a purely spiritual form of existing in the world, that the duties that you enact are not purely material, the right way to live in the world, but they are also a part of the moksha dharma, the path to liberation. They are a form of spiritual practice, a yoga, a karma yoga that elevates one towards the state of liberation from rebirth. Now here, and as we'll see repeatedly throughout this chapter, the sattva guna and the karma yoga are shown to be identical, one and the same. The karma yoga is in relation to the sattva guna. Now, in chapter 14, Krishna was saying that all three of the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, they are sources of bondage, and that was stated. We have to become gunatita, Krishna said, beyond all three gunas. But nonetheless, what we can learn here is that, if you like, sattva guna has a dual status. Yes, it is. It is one of the gunas. It is one of the attributes of this world, and as such, ultimate liberation means to transcend sattva as well as the other two gunas and become gunatita, beyond all contact with this world, utterly liberated. But the dual identity is that sattva guna is also the gateway, if you like, a key part of the path to gunatita. One attains gunatita by means of sattva guna. So on the one hand you transcend it, but on the other hand it is part of the path to liberation. So when we think about sattva guna, what does it mean? It means purity. It means kindness, it means compassion, it means consideration from others, it means enlightened wisdom, it means a benign view of the world. Now, all of that might be said, well, it's just part of our existence in this world that we have to transcend. Yes, that's right. But the way to transcend it is by employing it, using it. It is part of the path. Of course, when one reaches the goal, then one doesn't need the path anymore. But as long as one hasn't reached the goal, one must embrace the sattva guna. And we can think right back to chapter 2, verse 45, where Krishna said, he talked about the Vedas, Trigunya Vishaya Veda. The Vedas are full of the three gunas. Nistrigunya Bhagavadgītā. Now you must be nistrigunya. You must go beyond the gunas, Krishna said there. Nirdvandvo, be free from duality, but also nitya sattvasto, So he said, be nistraigunya, and he said, oh, but always be situated in sattva. So you can see there that sattva guna has a dual identity as something to be transcended, but also the means by which transcendence is achieved. An example I've seen given is if you have a thorn in your foot or your hand, you can use another big thorn to pluck it out. So yes, go beyond the gunas, but use the sattva guna as the means by which you achieve that. Okay, and I think there we can see that we'll see again and again this close congruence between the sattva guna and the karma yoga. So Krishna says, Karyamityeva yat karma niyatam kriyate arjuna sangam tyaktva palam chaiva satyagaha satviko mataha. That type of renunciation, when it's done, when it is, if you like, it's not physical renunciation because the action is performed, but what is renounced is the sangha, the attachment, and the phala, the desire for, the selfish desire for personal benefits from it, material benefits from it. And now we see the reason why Krishna reversed the order, because he wants to say more about this. So in verse 10 he says, I think it's 10, isn't it? Nadveshtiya kushalam karma kushale nanu sajjate. He's talking about two types of action here, kushala and akushala. Kushala is pleasant action. Akushala obviously is unpleasant action, and we know it. I mean, it's referring to our duties. Sometimes fulfilling our responsibilities, looking after our children is immensely pleasurable. Sometimes it's a great burden. I remember my mother used to go and visit my grandmother in care home. My grandmother wasn't, by that time, was struggling mentally, and she was often quite abusive, actually, and it was really quite painful for my mother to go. It was akushala karma, but nonetheless, it was a duty as a daughter to, even though it wasn't pleasing, to go and fulfill that obligation, to go and see that her mother was being cared for and looked after in the best possible way. So what does Krishna say? Nadveshtiya kushalam karma, that in this state of desireless action, the renunciation of desire that is sattvic, nadveshtiya kushalam karma, he doesn't hate the akushala karma, he doesn't feel a loathing for it. Why? Karyamiti, it's got to be done, it's the proper thing to do, and therefore he doesn't feel, oh, this is such a burden, this is terrible, this is exhausting me, I hate doing this. Oh God. No, nadveshtiya kushalam karma, he does it because he accepts it, because it's right, it's proper to be done. Nadveshtiya kushalam karma, kushale nanu sajjite. And in terms of the kushala karma, kushale, is not attached. Kushale nanu sajjite, not anu sajjite. He's not longing all the time for them to perform that part of your obligatory duties. I don't know, taking your children to football or cricket or something like that, which you sometimes drag them along because you want to go yourself. You'd say, I'm doing my obligatory duty of parenthood by taking my children with me to do something that I want to do. No, but you do it karyamiti because it's the proper thing to do. It's right, it's proper. Just like datavyam, it's proper to give. Karyam, it's proper to fulfill your responsibilities. It's what it means to be a properly situated person. So Krishna says, Nadveshtiya kushalam karma. He doesn't hate the akushala karma, the duties, or he doesn't loathe them, he doesn't dislike them. Nadveshtiya kushalam karma. Kushale nanu sajjite, and he's not attached, he's not thinking, oh, I'm enjoying this like anything, it's just done because it's the proper thing to do. Kushale nanu sajjite. Tyagi, and here's another point, this point again, Tyagi, the renouncer, if you like, sattva samavishta. These are all descriptive terms for the person who performs his duties in this way, without loathing that which is unpleasant, without enjoying and being attached to that which is pleasant. Tyagi, he's tyaging, he's a renouncer, tyaging. is sattva samavishta. He is fully absorbed in the sattva guna. You can see that point I was making previously, again reinforced here, that this karma yoga tyaga, if you like, is sattva samavishta, is fully absorbed in sattva. Medhavin, he is wise, intelligent. He sees things as they properly are. He's, in a sense, transcended his attachments and his own selfish ideas, and he does things, he's looking back, what is the right thing to do? Not what is going to be pleasing to me, what am I going to get pleasure from, but what is right. And it's that kind of vision, understanding the world free from attachments, free from desires. That is a medhavin, a wise person. Jagi sattva samavishta medhavi chinna sangshayaha, and whose chinna means chopped up actually, but and sangshraya means doubts, misgivings, hesitations. No, he's determined. Chinna sangshayaha, karyamiti, this is what should be done. Chinna sangshraya, no doubt about it. I now understand the proper way in which I should live, which is fulfilling my social, familial obligations without desire, without attachment, simply because it should be done. Chinna sangshraya, there's no doubt about it. Okay. Natvestya kushalam karma, kushalenanu sanstite, tyagi, sattva samavishto, medhavi, chinna sangshayaha. And then Krishna makes a very obvious point. He's talking about renunciation, and he's insisting that renunciation is essentially a state of consciousness. It's not about, and he made that point back in chapter 3 when he talked about people who may renounce the actions, the physical actions, but what was that verse again? It's chapter 3 verse 6. I know the last line is mityachara hasa uchyate yastvindriyani manasa, no, it's not that, karmendriyani samyamya asti manasa smaran. Yes, that's the one, verse 6. Karmendriyani samyamya, restricting the physical actions, the karma endriya, samyamya, yaaste manasa smaran, but in his mind, manasa, he's always thinking about the things. So physically, he's restrained. Maybe he's a monk in a monastery or something like that, a Buddhist center or something like that. But his mind is still a surging mass of desires. Yaaste manasa smaran, indriyartan. He's thinking about the objects of sensory pleasure. That's what his mind is smaran, thinking about all the time. Vimudatma. He's a foolish person. He's bewildered. And mityataraha sa uchyate. He is called, his actions are false. Why are they false? Because his mind isn't with his body. He's forcing himself to do it when his mind isn't ready. So Krishna's drawing that contrast again here in this 18th chapter between physical renunciation, putting on the saffron garb, shaving your head with I don't know, all the trappings of renunciation, the outward show of renunciation, but in his heart of heart, in his mind, he's still a raging mass of desires. And often those desires will take the form of, is everybody seeing how renounced I am? Is everybody noticing what a great spiritual person I am? I wish more people would admire me. Maybe they'll give me some donation, that sort of thing. The mind is still filled with desires. But real renunciation, which Krishna says, it doesn't matter so much about your physical position. You can be an ordinary person living in the world, doing your job, going about your general duties, but renunciation is a state of consciousness. That's Krishna's real point. And I think it's a very sensible and obvious point. We've seen so many examples over the centuries of people who were put up on a pedestal as great spiritual religious persons, only to come crashing down as the desires that are still surging in the mind overwhelm them. Tyagi sattva made of each in the sanctuary. Oh yes, and that's the point that Krishna comes on to make now in verse 11. Nahi deha brita shakyam chaktum karmanya seishataha. Anyway, the idea of giving up action, he's saying, is ridiculous for a dehabrit. A dehabrit is a person who has a body, who bears a body. Nahi dehabrita shakyam. Shakyam means possible. So it's not possible for a dehabrit, an embodied person. Nahi dehabrita shakyam chaktum karmanya seishaha. Chaktum, again, it's the same word as chaga, means to renounce. It's the infinitive. To renounce karma aseishataha, to completely renounce action. We said that before. You can't. You've got to get food. You've got to do something in the world. So you can't give up all action completely. It's part of being a living entity. It's part of being embodied that you have to do something. You can't just sit here. Although, in contrast to what Krishna says, there's a story narrated in the Mahabharata, I think in some Puranas as well, about Prahlad, who encounters a person who is Dehabrit, an embodied person who does exactly like that. He's called the Ajagara Dharma. He follows the Dharma of the python. Ajagara, a python, means one, and a creature that eats goats, I think, Ajagara. But this sage or sadhu we meet said, I never do anything. I just lie here and wait. And sometimes people come and give me loads of food. Sometimes I fast, but I do no action. Anyway, Krishna takes a different view here. Nahi dehabrita shakyam chaktum karmanya seishataha. It's not possible if we're embodied. We have to perform some action, albeit to a limited degree. Yastu karma palatyagi, but one who is a karma palatyagin, but one who is giving up the fruits of action, one who is renouncing desire for pleasurable results from action, satyagi ityabhidiyate. He is the real tyagin. He is the real, or she is the real renunciant, not one who has all the trappings of renunciation, the renunciate's outfit, etc., dressing up in the robes and things like that, and the saffron outfit and things. They have the external trappings of tyaga, but the real tyagin is the person who has the consciousness of tyaga, who has looked at the world and decided, I will set aside the objects of pleasure that are so avidly sought after by the mass of the people, and I will seek a higher goal. That's real tyaga. And you don't have to go here, there, or anywhere else. You can stay exactly what you're doing, fulfill all your obligations. Why? Karyamiti. They should be done. But in your heart of hearts, there is true renunciation. That's why there's a passage in the Mahabharata, in the Shanti Parvan, in which there's a merchant. His name is Tuladhara, and he gives a wonderful teaching to a Brahmin renunciate called Jajali. And Jajali comes to Varanasi, he meets Tuladhara. Tuladhara is just a shopkeeper. He sells different things. And Tuladhara then instructs him about the highest values of life, particularly ahimsa, and never harming any living being. But one of the things I like about that particular treatise is the fact that Tuladhara isn't some great guru or sage with thousands of followers. He's just a shopkeeper, and yet in his heart, in his consciousness, there is the highest spiritual wisdom. And I think that's the point that Krishna's making here. Nahi deha brita shakyam tyaktum karmanya seishataha. Yastu karma palatyagi, one who is a karma palatyagi, who's given up the desire for the fruits of action, who doesn't have selfish materialistic motivations for action. Satyagiti abhidiyate. He is said to be the real tyagin, the real renunciate. Satyagiti abhidiyate. And that's really, at that point, I'm not sure what verse is it? Is it verse 12? I think we've got up to now, maybe. That's really, this is the concluding verse on Krishna's discussion about tyaga in response to Arjuna's question. No, it's verse 11, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so in verse 12, Krishna changes the subject, and he's not exactly changing the subject. It's not an abrupt change. He moves smoothly on, shall we say, and talks about he's really, actually I'm wrong, 12, he's really still talking about renunciation, and he's talking about karma, future karma, and liberation. So let's see what he says. Verse 12, anishtam ishtam mishram cha trividam karmanaha palam. Trividam karmanaha palam. Karmanaha palam means the fruits of action. And what does Krishna say about the fruits of action? And he's talking about the law of karma here. He says it's trividam. It's threefold. The actions that we perform produce results of one of three types. And the three types he defines are anishtam, ishtam, mishram cha. Anishtam is things we don't like, things we don't want, suffering, unhappiness, problems. Ishtam is things we do want, pleasure, joy, prosperity. And Mishra is, I think it means a builder, actually, in some, maybe in Hindi, the Mishras were builders and craftsmen, but actually it means mixed, mixed. Anishtam, ishtam, mishram cha. So the threefold results of action is a fairly straightforward statement, actually, that if you perform righteous actions, you get ishta pala, the fruit you desire in the future, you get pleasure. If you perform wicked, selfish, harmful actions, then the pala, the fruit, is anishta. And as is most of our actions, there's a mixture of both good and bad, and then the result is mishra, mixed. So anishtam, ishtam, mishram cha, trividam karmanaha palam, the threefold results of action. Bhavatya tyaginam pretya. And these come to a person who is atyagin, who has not been able to develop the consciousness of renunciation. Such a person Krishna refers to as an atyagin, a non-renouncer, in the sense that, I suppose, like most of us, that person has continued to nurture desires for fruit, and therefore they are described as an atyagin. And such persons, we will experience future karma of the threefold types. Bhavati, it is bhavati atyaginam pretya. Pretya means after death. So in the next life, we will, because we haven't been able to give up attachments to the results of action, we will experience the fruits of action in the form of future karma, which will be unpleasant things, pleasant things, and mixed things. That's the point. The atyagins continue to experience the results of action. They continue to experience, to enjoy, to suffer, and to both, the fruits of action. The karma continues with them. In other words, they remain within this world. Bhavatya tyaginam pretya natu sanyasinam kvachit. But one, and Krishna switched the word here from tyagin to sanyasin. Not sure why, probably because he needed another syllable to keep the meter going. I think what he's showing here is that tyaga and sannyas are really one and the same, and that's a point I remember Ramanujacharya makes in his commentary on these verses. Tyaga and sannyas are synonyms, essentially. But the essential point here is that one who has developed this mood of detachment, of renunciation, not physical renunciation, but the consciousness of renunciation, by which he has given up selfish materialistic desires, that person has escaped from the effects of karma. In other words, moved towards moksha. Moksha, liberation, means liberation from all three types of karma. Liberation isn't ishtapala, it's not desirable fruits, it's not having a good time, rebirth in a prosperous situation. It is apala, no results at all, absolutely going beyond the whole domain of karma. And let's remember, again, I'd go back to that point, that this situation of one who does not experience the threefold results of karma is one who is sattva samavishto, who is within the domain of the sattva guna. It's the sattva guna that takes you to that state beyond karma, to that state of liberation. So the point again is being emphasized. Let's not be too much down on the sattva guna. Let's celebrate the sattva guna, because it's not only the right way to live in the world, it's not only moral, ethical, proper, it is also the path to liberation from karma, which is the whole thrust of the discourse of the Gita. How to break free from this endless progression of action, reaction, the cycle of karma. And it is by tyaga, by giving up our desires for the fruits of our action. That's the point. And that's the karma yoga again. We're right back in chapters 2 and 3, the initial line of spiritual argument that Krishna gave to Arjuna back there right at the beginning. A pleasing reminder. Yes, anishtam, ishtam, mishram cha, trividam karmanaha palam, bhavutya tyaginam precha. These come to the atyagin, the non-renouncer after death. Natu sannyasinam kvachit, but not for the sannyasins, not for the true renouncers whose consciousness is rid of materialistic desires, who perform their duties, fulfill all their responsibilities, not seeking any goal at all apart from doing it because it should be done. Karyamiti, that's right. Okay. Ishtam ishtam mishram cha, trividam karmana hapalam, bhavatya chaginam precha, natu sannyasinam kvachit. Now, genuinely, verse 13, we have come on to a different subject, which is, I suppose, related. It's still about action. And so there is a link there, and the link is karma, the performance of action. And this is interesting as well. Panchaitani mahabaho karanani nibodhame. Nibodhame means learn from me. Buddha. Nibuddha, become enlightened about me, understand from me, Nibbodha me. And what's Arjuna asked to now understand? Panchaitani karanani. Pancha etani karanani. Etani karanani means these causal factors. And pancha, those of you who know Indian languages at all will recognize pancha as 5. Panchaitani karanani. Panchaitani karanani, forgotten. Panchaitani karanani. Annoying. I just said this, didn't I? Panchaitani karanani. No, it's gone. The next line. Panchaitani karan. Oh no, it's just evocative. Panchaitani mahabaho, mighty armed Arjuna. Panchaitani mahabaho, karanani nibodhame. So we can omit mahabaho. It's just evocative addressed to Arjuna. Panchaitani mahabaho. So learn from me about these 5 causal factors. Sankhya kritante praktani siddhiye sarva karmanam. And let's take siddhiye sarva karmanam first. Siddhiye. Siddhi means perfection, completion, success. So and the siddhiye sarva karmanam means the siddhi of sarva karma, of all actions, and it means in the completion of all actions, in the result, the outcome of all actions. So what Krishna said is that there are 5 factors to be noted that bring about the result of all actions. So the theme of action is being continued, but it's really quite a different take on that. And Krishna says, Panchaitani karanane siddhiye sarva karmanam. There are 5 causal factors that are significant in the production of the result of action, whether it's a success or a failure. The outcome is shaped and determined by 5 factors. Now, I haven't forgotten the first bit. Sankhya Kritante, Krishna says here. That's interesting. He says they are established, Krita ante, Sankhya, in the Sankhya system. So Krishna is claiming that this view of the 5 causal factors that determine the outcome of all actions, sarva karmanam, are established in the teachings of Sankhya. I mean, I've read quite a number of Sankhya treatises, and including I've got one here actually, Sankhya Karika, the classical version of Sankhya, and I can't recall seeing these in those works. And Shankaracharya, that's a little cheeky there, says in this case Sankhya means Vedanta, because the Sankhya are an opposing school of thought in early Indian philosophy to Vedanta. So Shankara says, yeah, although Krishna talks about Sankhya, he's not really supporting the Sankhya faction. He really means Vedanta. Anyway, Sankhya Kritante Praktani are spoken of as Sankhya Kritante Praktani Siddhiye Sarva Karmanam, as bringing about the result of action, determining their 5 causal factors which shape and determine the outcome of the action, what the result of the various actions a person might perform will be. And of course, as we would expect and anticipate in the next verse, which is it verse 14 now? I think so, yeah. Yeah, that was 13, Panchadhan. Okay, and so in 14, Krishna gives a list of what those 5 causal factors are which determine the outcome of every action. Adhishtanam, tata korta, karanam cha pritakvidam, vividhash cha pritak cheshta, doivam chaivatra, panchamam, the 5th. Okay, adhishtanam really means, it could mean the place, but I think broader than that, it means the situation, the circumstances. Because if you perform an action in certain situations, certain circumstances, it will produce one result, but if it's in a different place or the weather's different or something like that, the situation, then a different result will be achieved. So adhishtanam is the location, the situation in which the action is performed. Adhishtanam tata karta. Kartri is the person who does it, the doer of the action, because I don't know if you put on Ishant Sharma to bowl, as I was watching today on the cricket, he was likely to take a wicket. If you put me on to bowl, he's unlikely to take a wicket in a match, because the Kartri is different. And they have, in that, obviously, the capacity, the talent, the ability of the performer of the action is another causal factor. Adhishtanam tata karta karanam. Karanam, I think, here means, I'll follow Shankara on this, and I think it means the instruments, the tools that are at one's disposal. You know, if you want to chop wood, for example, and you've got, I don't know, a sort of little knife and you're hacking at a log, you're not going to get a successful log. But if you've got a big sharp axe, then you will achieve a different outcome. So Karanam, I think, means the instruments at one's disposal. So what have we got? We've got the situation and circumstances, we've got the ability of the performer, we've got the instruments, Karanancha pritak vidam, of various different types. Pritag vidam, pritak means different types of instruments. Pritak vidam, karanam cha pritak vidam, vividash cha pritak chesha, and also the vividash pritak cheshta is the actions itself, the way you perform the action. And that, again, cheshta, that can be of different types, various different types. Vividash cha pritak cheshta, how well you perform the action. That's another, obviously, as well as the Kartri may be very adept. Ishant Sharma may be a good bowler, but he might have an off day. etc. So the various different ways in which you perform action will affect the outcome. Those are four then: the situation, the performer, the instruments, the way one acts, and what's the fifth? Daivam Chaivatra Panchamam. Daiva means destiny, fate, etc. The higher forces. And I think and of course, you know, there's that debate, and this came up a lot actually when we were having a Mahabharat seminar over the weekend online from Oxford. This question kept coming up about that, about how much free will does an individual want, or are all outcomes dictated solely by destiny? In other words, if you embark on a course of action, is your success or failure already predetermined by your destiny, which is shaped by karma? So there was some discussion of that point. The Mahabharata considers that in some detail, but it's interesting here. Krishna gives the fivefold definition, siddhiye sarva karmanam, the outcome of all action. Now, four of them are related to the endeavors that we make, our abilities, the situation, the type of endeavor we make. Only one, the fifth, is daivam. And I think from that, well, it's obvious from that really the outcome that is achieved in the performance of action is due to a combination of our endeavors and the different aspects of our endeavors, our ability, our efforts, the position we put ourselves in, the instruments we employ. They are karana. They are causal factors. It's not all destiny. Daivam is only the fifth. So there's an interaction between the endeavors we make and the destiny that influences the whole of our lives. In the Mahabharata, actually, that same point is made. I may have mentioned it before. The metaphor that is used in teaching on destiny is of the field and the sower. That the field is your destiny. It may be a highly fertile field, or it may be a barren field. And the fertile field represents a very propitious destiny that you have. The barren field represents a bad destiny shaped by unfortunate karma. But nonetheless, if you have a fertile field, an excellent field, if you don't work at it, if you don't make the endeavors, you're not going to get a good crop. If you just sit at home waiting for it to come, it's not going to happen. Even with the best destiny possible, you still need to interact with it in terms of your own endeavors. And likewise, you may have an unfortunate destiny. You may have past karma may have put you in an unpleasant situation, unfortunate situation, but nonetheless, if you're committed, you make endeavors, you plow the barren field, you water it and you fertilize it with organic fertilizer, obviously, then you can still get the results you seek. So that's the point, and I think that point is confirmed here, where Krishna lists 5 causal factors, 4 of which are to do with personal endeavor, and only one, the 5th, Daivam Eva Panchamam. Daiva is the 5th one. Okay, we'll just do the next verse because it's quite a simple one. What was that? Panchaitani Mahabaho Karanani Niboda Me Sankhya Kritante Praktani Siddhiye Sarva Karmanam. I've gone back a verse, haven't I? Adhishtanam Pratakarata Kurunam Cha Pratak Vidam Vividashcha Pritak Cheshta Daivam Chaivatra Panchamam. And now, concluding this little resume in the next verse, which I think is verse 15. Sharira Vang Manobiriat Korma Prarabate Naraha. Whatever action one performs, Sharira Vang Manobir, be it with your Sharira, with your body, Vang with your words, speak, Vak, Manobir with your mind as well, manas, the thoughts, all the actions. Action takes place not just physically, it takes place verbally. Action even takes place mentally. We've learned that before, that the results of action are very much about the state of consciousness which shapes them. So sharira vang manobiriat karma prarabhate naraha. Whatever action one performs, karma prarabhate naraha, nyayam va viparitam va, whether it be proper action, nyayam, or whether it be improper, wrong action, unrighteous action, viparitam action, nyayam va viparitam va, panchaite tajahetavaha. These five, pancha ete, tajya hetava, are the causal factors within it. So every time we act within the world according to the established truth of Sankhya, Sankhya Kritante, the outcome is then determined by those five factors. Panchate tajya hetavaha. Hetu, again, like karana, means causes that bring about the particular outcome of those actions. In all actions we perform with body, with words or mind, it is these five factors that determine the outcome. So I think verse 15 there is really just a conclusion of what's been said before in the previous two verses. What do we get now? Yes, Krishna moves on, slightly different subject in verses 16 and 17 before he resumes his review, his series of threefold analyses of different again related to action initially, but he analyzes different categories. He analyzes knowledge, he analyzes the performer of action, he analyzes the action, he analyzes understanding, resolution and happiness. All of these he provides a threefold analysis of in relation to the gunas. But he makes another point before he really starts off on that. I think that begins from verse 20 and we got up to verse 15 today. So another couple of little points that he wants to make before he resumes the line of discourse really that he was following in chapter 17, wasn't he there? But 2 minutes past 9, we will stop there. You can see it's still, let's see, have a look at England. There you are. England are midsummer. At 2 minutes past 9, if you're somewhere else in the world, we get lovely light evenings at this time of year. It's my favourite time of year. Anyway, we'll be back again next year and we'll pick up from chapter 18 again. And thank you very much for listening in, and hopefully you can listen again next week, when we'll carry on with this discussion of chapter 18. But anyway, good evening. Namaste.